The story of the long-running comedy series centered around Benny Hill is one of global fame, changing cultural attitudes, and eventual controversy. For decades, the show entertained millions with its fast-paced slapstick, musical sketches, and playful humor that crossed language barriers. However, behind the laughter and iconic theme music, criticism was slowly building. What once felt lighthearted and harmless began to clash with shifting social values. A single controversial sketch in the late 1980s is often cited as the turning point that triggered backlash and ultimately contributed to the show's decline and cancellation. Early life and background: Alfred Hawthorne Hill, known professionally as Benny Hill, was born in Southampton, England in the 1920s. His upbringing was shaped by a family with both practical and performance influences. While his father worked in a surgical appliance business, his grandfather had been a circus clown, hinting at a lineage of entertainment. Hill's early education did not immediately point towards show business, and he worked a variety of jobs including retail, driving, and manual labour. These early experiences later influenced his ability to portray working-class characters and everyday comedic situations. War service and formative experience. During World War II, Hill was called up for military service and trained in mechanical and technical roles within the British Army. He worked as a mechanic, truck driver, and searchlight operator, contributing to essential wartime operations. His deployment during key military campaigns exposed him to discipline, teamwork, and pressure-driven environments. Later, he joined the Combined Services Entertainment Division, where he performed for troops. This period proved formative, allowing him to experiment with timing, audience engagement, and sketch performance in real-world conditions, shaping his future comedic style. Early entertainment career: after the war, Hill transitioned into entertainment through radio, where he first gained recognition. His appearances on popular variety programs showcased his quick wit and adaptability. As television began to rise in popularity, he made the move to the new medium, which allowed him to expand into visual comedy. Unlike radio, television gave him the ability to use physical humor, facial expressions, and elaborate sketches. He quickly adapted, building a reputation for versatility and developing the foundations of what would later become his signature comedic approach. Rise of television success. By the 1960s and 1970s, Hill had become a prominent figure in British television comedy. His shows featured short sketches, recurring characters, and fast-paced storytelling that relied heavily on visual humor. The format allowed him to play multiple roles within a single episode, often shifting between personalities with ease. His ability to combine slapstick, parody, and musical elements made the program widely accessible, especially in international markets. The show became one of Britain's most exported television comedies, gaining popularity far beyond its original audience. Comedy style and appeal: Hill's comedy style relied heavily on physical humor, exaggerated expressions, and rapid-fire editing. His sketches often featured chase sequences, mistaken identities, and visual gags that required little dialogue, making them easily understood across language barriers. Recurring motifs included playful satire of authority figures, everyday professions, and romantic misunderstandings. Music played an important role, particularly the instantly recognizable theme tune. While audiences appreciated the energy and inventiveness, critics later argued that some elements of the humor reflected outdated stereotypes and shifting social norms. Changing cultural attitudes. By the late 1970s and 1980s, cultural attitudes toward comedy and representation were beginning to shift significantly. Humor that had once been widely accepted started to face scrutiny, particularly in relation to gender roles and objectification. Audiences and critics began reassessing older comedic formats through a more modern lens. What had previously been considered harmless slapstick was increasingly viewed as insensitive or inappropriate. This changing environment placed pressure on long-running entertainment programs to adapt, modernize, or risk losing public support. The controversial sketch. The turning point often associated with the show's decline came from a sketch aired in the late 1980s. It featured a parody of a beauty pageant in which women were presented in a way that critics described as objectifying and outdated. Although intended as satire, the execution was widely criticized for reinforcing stereotypes and relying on visual humor that no longer aligned with contemporary expectations. The backlash was immediate, with some viewers and commentators calling it offensive and tone-deaf, intensifying debate about the show's place in modern television. Public and media backlash. Following the controversial sketch, media response grew increasingly critical. Newspapers and commentators questioned whether the show still had a place in a changing cultural landscape. Discussions about sexism in comedy became more prominent, and the program was frequently cited as an example of outdated entertainment. Although it still retained a loyal fan base, its broader reputation began to shift. International broadcasters also started reassessing whether to continue airing the series, reflecting a growing discomfort with its style of humor. Decline and cancellation. As criticism mounted, the show experienced declining support from networks and advertisers. Production continued for a time, but the atmosphere surrounding the program had changed significantly. What was once a dominant force in global television comedy was now increasingly seen as controversial. Eventually, the series was cancelled in 1989 after decades on air. While no single factor alone ended the show, the combination of cultural change, media scrutiny, and specific controversial content contributed to its conclusion. Conclusion. The legacy of the Benny Hill television era remains complex. On one hand, it introduced a unique form of visual comedy that reached audiences around the world and influenced generations of performers. On the other, it became a focal point in discussions about how humor evolves with society's values. The controversy that surrounded its final years reflects a broader shift in entertainment history, where changing cultural expectations reshaped what audiences were willing to accept. Today, it stands as both a landmark in comedy and a reminder of how media can be reinterpreted over time.